We're back for another Premier Pundits podcast. My name is Ben Dinnery, and of course, I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, Mr. McKenna. How the devil are you, my friend?
Not too good now that we're recording this and found out that Raheem Sterling isn't playing. He was my triple captain in FPL. But the positive is that I'm wildcarding this week and I will be getting him out, and maybe I should vow to never get him in because it's burn after burn with him. It's ridiculous. Yeah, the thumbs down from you. It's hard to get inspired by FPL at the moment because every kind of decision that I'm making, I brought in Barnes, he gets injured. Rudiger was rested. Mr. Sterling, triple captained him, doesn't play. I mean, I was going with the data. Data's worked against me there. So I'm not really sure.
Cancelo as well? Is he one of yours?
Yep, he's one of mine as well.
So double City burn.
Yeah.
It's a City combustion.
Yeah, it's really terrible. I mean, but I'm trying to be positive because I do have the wild card. I have pulled it this week. You said you attempted as well. I don't know, have you been lured into the wild card?
Do you know what it is? I don't know whether it is that I'm really not that bothered about my team at the moment because we've done all right the last couple of game weeks, or that I just can't be bothered to even think about trying to pull this team apart and look for another 11 differentials to slot in there. It's different if I'm coming off the back of a bad game week with a poor points return. I've got the motivation there, but I've been well above average in the last 3 game weeks. I've still got all of my chips and I've got my wild card, so I can afford to use my free hit probably in 29. I might even just just hold up my wild card until 30 or 31 or whenever. I can do that, man. I might even just use it until the last weekend. Who knows? There's talk, there's some suggestion, I don't know, that there could be a huge double game week towards the end of the season, brought about by the possibility of fans attending games. So there is talk around changing fixtures around the dates. If that was to throw them together into like a huge, big double game week, then obviously I'd want to be a part of that massively. So unless some real pressing issues come to the fore over the next maybe 24 to 48 hours, then I can't really see myself doing anything other than sitting tight and sitting with what I've got.
I look forward to possibly doing a wildcard team with you, though, because last time we did it was great fun. It's been an enjoyable experience doing it with you this time as well. And this is the fun bit of it. I talk through my methodology, which hasn't been great this season. But let's go through it then. So I'll focus, first of all, what the attacks in the top 10k have. Gundogan, 92%. Salah, Son, Kane, Fernandes, Bamford, Watkins, Rafinha, De Bruyne, Calvert-Lewin, Antonio, Sterling and Lingard. I mean, any surprises there for you, Ben?
Not really. Maybe just the percentage when the 92% on Gundogan was Jesus Christ, wow. And maybe the return of Kevin De Bruyne. I'm wondering if that changes the mindset of those managers in the top 10k who, are pretty much on the ball with regards to, is he going to give those same attacking outputs? Like I say, the game against Southampton is live now. City have just took the lead, and it's actually Kevin De Bruyne who's on the score sheet. We had been talking earlier how he maybe isn't back or hadn't been up to his best. Certainly looked a little bit out of sorts in the Manchester derby. And I'm just wondering, does that, like I say, does Kevin De Bruyne being thrust back into the limelight just change Gundogan? And do you lose your appeal, or at that price point, is he still a viable option?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, such a high ownership. I mean, one of the surprising ones for me was Watkins. 53% of top 10k players have him. And I don't think he's been that exceptional this season to kind of justify it. I'd say that, looking at the other ones, Bamford, Antonio, even Calvert-Lewin have done great, but Watkins has really underperformed data, and the Aston Villa attack at the moment is not good at all. We'll get on to that. But yeah, on the De Bruyne situation, I agree with you as well. But what's your feelings on Watkins, Ben?
Do you know what? In terms of, I'm just double checking. I knew he had hit double figures for the season. So you've got 10 goals in the Premier League. We've also talked about a striker that no other player in the Premier League this season has hit the woodwork more times than him, which is 7. Now, had those shots been converted into goals, and maybe we had another 3, 4, 5 goals to Watkins, we're talking about a matter of inches. Don't we always, by the way? Does that then change that mindset or that philosophy around, well, actually, he actually is a good asset, because he still looks a threat. I mean, he's a little bit unfortunate against Wolves, and there have been a few other occasions where, a lick of paint, and if he's sitting on 13 and 14 goals in that Aston Villa team, the way they're currently performing, then I think that's got to be, it's got to be considered a great season, considering it's his first in the top flight.
It has to be considered a good one. I do agree with you on that, but there's just been ample opportunities kind of looking at him that there has been times where I thought, oh, goodness me, Watkins should be putting those away. He's been frustrating. I haven't owned him much this season. I don't know if I've owned him at all, but looking at him, looking at the Wolves game, I think that's a prime example of him not meeting expectations, not putting those chances away. But the thing with Watkins, and he's similar to Aguero in this sense, is he's not just assisting goals directly, he's not just scoring goals directly, but it is his movement. He's a facilitator for the Aston Villa team. So he's good in that sense. He's great movement off the ball, kind of attracting defenders onto him, breaking the shape of other teams' defences. But the negative thing for me is that doesn't get you FPL points. Being a good mover of the ball, if he's not putting those in the back of the net, then it's not justifiable enough to me. Whereas Bamford, Antonio, Calvert-Lewin are doing that, and Antonio and Bamford are doing it at a similar price to him, and arguably in a better team at the moment. And so that's why I'm not looking at him at the moment. But yeah, so the other methodology that I've gone with there, so I think there's quite a few in that top 10k that I do have an interest in. But the other thing that I've looked at is the kind of individual team data and then individual player data of players so far this season, and then more recently in the kind of second half of the season to evaluate who to bring in. And just quickly, the best attacks from the whole of this season in terms of XG, top is Man City, no surprises there. But second is Liverpool, underperforming, which is unusual for them. And it does kind of beg the question of Salah's getting kind of good underlying data, so is Liverpool. Is it wrong to ship them out? Manchester United are a hard one because you're not sure who's going to start each week with Martial, Cavani. Then Rashford is obviously injured. And so Fernandes and Shaw, who we talked about in the defensive discussions in my defence, I think are good enough coverage there. Chelsea attack, I think you have to avoid because you don't know who's going to start. Maybe Mason Mount, and we'll get onto him in a second. And then Leeds, finally, Rafinha has looked good, but it's a difficult run of games, so I think Bamford is the only one to kind of have justification. So the other 2 points in terms of XG that I found interesting this season, there is a shake of the head. We'll get on to the Bamford point in a sec. Interesting point for me is Leicester have hugely overperformed this season. Vardy does that a lot, but I don't think it's sustainable now because obviously Maddison and Barnes are out of the picture, and so I'm not sure if Vardy will be getting almost fed the opportunities to then overperform. And Tottenham have also overperformed a fair amount. But in this instance, I'd say that Son, Kane and Bale all kind of overperform expected metrics because they're world-class players. And so actually that one is more likely to be sustained. So in terms of goals scored for the season, you then kind of look at the table. So XG kind of gives you some insight, but then Leicester sit third with 48 goals and Tottenham sit fifth with 46. So there's kind of that consideration as well of actual goals being scored and how good these attacks are at turning this XG, these chances, into actual goal scoring opportunities. So yeah, looking at that Leeds point though, you were almost incensed with me that I would even dare to suggest to continue holding Bamford. What is your feelings there, Ben?
Oh, you may correct me with the data. We talk about Leeds and how great they are as an attacking force, and they would create lots of chances. And Bamford inherently and Rafinha are probably the two main benefactors from that, with a sprinkling of Dallas maybe in recent weeks. But it just, to me, instead of strengthening the cause for Bamford, it just tells me he's crap. It just tells me if your XG is 25 and you're scoring 10, that tells me, well, you're absolutely garbage, by the way. You should be scoring a lot more and doing a lot more and constantly bringing, or putting your faith in Bamford in the hope that he will, his metrics will match up. Then to me, that is a definition of insanity. And it's, fool me once, but fool me twice, then you know what? You've got nobody to blame. Look, that's my opinion. I just kind of get away with Bamford. Somebody who misses so many chances, it's absolutely ridiculous. It drives us crazy, and that's why I could never own him. And that's why I'm blinkered as well with him. I just see the misses, and I don't see the good bits anymore. I just see the missed chances.
I mean, the thing with Bamford is that I'm trying to get his XG kind of for the season to see, but looking at him, he's not done that bad a job in terms of actually meeting it. I was quite surprised. XG of 14.42 and he's got 13 goals, so it's only
that is terrible.
That's a 1.4.
We all know the XG anyway metric is massively flawed. Hugely flawed.
And then Leeds themselves have actually slightly overperformed XG this season. So looking at
I tell you,
a flawed
the job's gone wrong.
You look at it, so they've got 40 expected goals this season. They've scored 43. So they are putting these chances away. What's interesting to me is there's goal scorers obviously much better than Bamford, but he's doing an all right job.
What about non-penalty XG?
So non-penalty XG of Leeds is the third best this season. That's 38.48, and they've scored 43 goals. So again, they're beating that. Not
on the spot kicks as well? Is he or not?
No, I don't think Bamford is. So he's done an all right job. There's no big criticism that I can lay upon him. For a player coming up from the Championship, you expect a kind of 1/3, 33% drop off, and he's kind of masked that well. Leeds have masked that well. They've done a good job in kind of doing it, but Ben, I can see that one is a troublesome one, so I'll bring it on to more discussions. But looking at the teams there, best attacks XG, I've said about Man City, it's kind of hard to get into their attack. You've talked about it as well with De Bruyne. You're not sure who to back. I back Sterling, and he's screwed me over majorly. Liverpool, hard justification because of underperformance. Man United, hard apart from Fernandes. Chelsea, unreliable. And Leeds, Bamford. Leicester have done well, but without Maddison and Barnes, I'm not too sure. And Tottenham are the kind of focal points at the moment. So from the team data there, what do you think about those kind of choices from players from those teams? Do you kind of agree with me on those assessments there?
Yeah, look, it's hard to go against that. There's no real standouts. In terms of a team, it's City, head and shoulders at this moment in time. But with regards to individuals within that City lineup, just too hard to pick because, again, we've seen Pep tonight made 5 changes. I think Gundogan was the one everybody would have went for maybe 3 or 4 game weeks ago. But now that De Bruyne is back, he's regressed a little bit. You find it hard to justify any outlay in that Liverpool player because they're all high premium. Maybe Diogo Jota is the one you might go for, but he's coming off the back of a long-term injury. Anybody else, there's value elsewhere. I mean, look at my man tonight, Ward-Prowse, another goal against City. So, that's 2 in this double game week for him, and I've kept the faith, and he's on set pieces, dead balls, penalties now that Ings is out. They've got some, a decent fixture again at the weekend. So I think there's worse players than him around.
Yeah, Ward-Prowse is one of the ones that you've chosen this season. You stuck with him. I'm surprised he didn't get the captain's armband because, you've done well out of him. But unfortunately, you've been stuck with the rash man. And he has been like a rash on your team at times, just kind of giving you a lot of problems, itching, a little bit of worries and all that. So looking at the individual player data then, kind of almost looking into maybe players outside of those teams. I looked at the XGI of these players. I looked at the XG and also the expected points. Midfielders, Bruno Fernandes in terms of XGI at the top. Salah, Sterling, De Bruyne, Mane and Son are the best midfielders there. And then looking at the forwards, you've got Kane, Vardy, Bamford, Watkins, Calvert-Lewin and Mapai. Now, obviously, the caveat with Mapai is he's heavily underperformed and realistically shouldn't be in consideration. Then looking at the expected points, mids, Fernandes, Salah, Son, Sterling, Kane, Rashford and Neto, which is an interesting one because I think he's kind of maybe one that the community might look forward to from game week 31 onwards because of the switch for Wolves. He's kind of like the only good player in that team. And then forwards, Bamford is top of expected points, then Kane, Watkins, Vardy, Firmino, Werner, DCL, and then again the underperforming Mapai. So out of those, any of them kind of jumped out at you, kind of almost a shock, or did you expect them, and would you expect a lot of these to make up the kind of makeup of my team?
I mean, I'm surprised that Bamford, in terms of his expected points, is top in that. That's something that I wouldn't really expect. Although, you look at that league, when Leeds attack, and like I say, you've only got 2 main outlets and offensive returns at this moment in time in Rafinha and Bamford. You mentioned Firmino as well in that list. I mean, I think by his standards and by Liverpool's, they've just been generally, poor. He's also carrying a little bit of an injury at the moment, so there's no guarantees that he may be involved, this weekend. So, yeah, look, it's difficult. I don't know. I'm at this point where is the data almost become a little bit of as opposed to identifying and clearly identifying players who you expect to return and to star, maybe that's become a bit of a passenger around the fixtures and around, these external factors which are now coming into play with, what is 10 games left of the season.
Well, this is where the eye test comes in and also the reality of the situation there because, looking at it, Mapai has come up quite high in a few of those discussions. But realistically, no, he's not been good enough this season to justify any sort of interest in him. But you've also highlighted an interesting point there of the fixtures. Again, I suppose that's another eye test. Data kind of points to that as well. And looking at the fixture difficulty, factoring some of those players and teams in there DCL obviously features high. Everton have the second best run until the end of the season. Liverpool actually have the best, but we'll come on to evaluating them. Arsenal third best, Leeds fourth best, and West Ham fifth best kind of runs to the end of the season. So again, those things have to be calculated for understanding with these attacks and kind of capitalising, because again, this is season-long data, but some of the things that I've done to evaluate it, so looking at West Ham, for example, or Aston Villa, I'm kind of plumbing for West Ham because more recently, West Ham have been in great form. Aston Villa have regressed a lot. So starting with one of the kind of big players that I have to look at is Kevin De Bruyne. He's so important to that Man City attack. But Ben, what's your feeling with him, kind of having him in my side? Because he's high up on XGI, he's high up on expected points metrics in terms of FPL, but he might be managed for the Champions League. He might not start each game week. And so at his price point, and it's a huge outlay, you know, in terms of it, he's one of the most premium players. Is it a bit dangerous to kind of put a lot of faith in him, or kind of looking at his history? Usually when De Bruyne's fit, he plays, but this is a totally different season, isn't it?
Completely different. Couple of things to consider. Certainly from my standpoint, Kevin De Bruyne, we've already seen, has suffered one or two niggling muscular problems already this season. So that is certainly a factor that comes into play when they're looking at player load management. So Pep and his backroom staff will be analysing that. Now, it looks as if City are well on their way to another 3 points against Southampton this evening. You know, the league has, you know, it's all done by the shouting, really. So, and Pep, by his own admission, still fighting on four fronts. He can afford to take his foot off the gas. Comments tonight were, my players aren't robots, they're human beings. They get injured. They, you know, will not always be able to perform at their highest level. Can we afford to rest players? Can we afford to, you know, look after them? And do we need to take risks? No, we don't. And for me, that would be the worry with Kevin De Bruyne, because City coped, you know, admirably without him. Others stepped up and came to the fore. Gundogan being, you know, the main, you know, I mentioned benefactors. Nobody benefited more from the absence of De Bruyne than Gundogan. You know, he really sort of stood up and was counted there for City. And, you know, Pep will know that he can rely on Gundogan again and others. I mean, tonight, you know, even though you got Gabriel Jesus scored a couple of goals in recent games, and Sergio Aguero back, both players start on the bench. He's not afraid to go with, and he's went with, think, Foden as a false nine. Sterling on the bench. I mean, the amount of options that he has at his disposal. Cancelo, Stones on the bench, from back to front. So that's always going to be my concern. And the closer we get to that finishing line, and the deeper City get in the Champions League, and the closer they get to domestic cup finals and so on and so forth, then those players all become a rotation risk in and around those Premier League fixtures.
And this is the major worry, even with the kind of defensive double up that I do have with Manchester City, as well as we've kind of talked. Cancelo was in my team, is in my team at the moment, but it is a huge consideration that I might take him out, because I think Diaz starts week in, week out, but Cancelo does have that risk because he's so important to the attack of that team that Pep will want to protect him, want to rest him. And certain games like this, Man City against Southampton, Man City probably against Fulham, they should have more than enough to see those over the line without the interesting, unique way that Cancelo contributes to the attack. And in the Champions League, they will need him more in those situations. So it's a dangerous one. And with De Bruyne as well, going into these last 10 games of the season, you want assurances that your players are starting week in, week out, because making these transfers with the amount of injuries that we're seeing as well, it just seems an unnecessary risk. So it's a huge consideration for me. It might be shocking to some people, but De Bruyne, he's currently in my team, but I'm really unsure. Another one that I think is shocking people that I'm taking out is Salah. Huge shift in opinion there. After last week's show, I kind of said I would take out Fernandes and have Salah. I'm keeping Fernandes for now and taking out Salah. It was kind of a premium shift that I was considering. And the reason why I've kind of gone back in it, and I'm happy to admit that I probably got it wrong for last game week, and I do think that over the next few game weeks, Salah, he could do all right, but Man United have some really difficult games, so maybe I might be proved right in the short term. But looking at it, we're talking about Man City there with rotation risk. Salah brought off early. The whole of the Liverpool team was weakened for that Premier League game, and so the focus seems to be from Klopp that Champions League is key. Maybe their only way to get Champions League for next season as well. And so it worries me looking at that. Liverpool do sit second for XG non-penalty in the league this season, third most big chances, third for big shots inside the box. Salah over the last 6 game weeks, fairly good attacking data, but will he be starting week in, week out as somebody at such a premium price? And so I don't know if I can trust in him to even start each game week, and then he might be shifted off early as well, as Klopp thinks, right, I'm going to rest him for this midweek fixture against X, whoever that may be in the Champions League. And so that is a real concern there. Whereas Fernandes realistically starts each game week, and that's kind of almost a minimum bar that you and I both expressed this season, Ben, that these premium players, or any of our players, have to start week in, week out. That is the bare minimum. And then you can kind of go with differentials from there. So if you were a Salah owner, would you be pretty worried at the moment?
He's not making it an easy decision. If we go back to when our wildcard before Christmas, and we had the idea of almost anonymizing the names, there was no emotional context to any of it. It was purely stats based. If we sort of adopt a similar kind of philosophy, but instead of looking at the underlying data, because that can maybe misdirect you with regards to Salah, you just look at outputs in terms of fantasy outputs and maybe fixture difficulty, saying, I think if you were to look at that, you'd look at the price point and you would look at those returns and just say there's no value in there whatsoever. The worrying thing from Jurgen Klopp was that he thought Mo Salah looked tired. He said he looked fatigued. It was funny, it came just moments after, I think the ball broke down. Fulham were caught on the counter. Mo Salah made a half-hearted sort of gesture to get back in and then sort of eased up. You seen Jurgen Klopp talk to his backroom staff, have a chat, and moments later he was getting hauled off. Now, whether that was in response to, if you're in my team and you work hard, and if you don't, you're off, or whether he genuinely did believe that he thought that Salah was tired. And I think in terms of since Salah's arrived at Anfield, I think that was the earliest he's ever been substituted in a game. You would expect a response from Mo Salah, but we've been seeing that all season as well. You see, we're talking about high-end premium players. You can forgive 1 week, you can maybe forgive 2 weeks, but when it's 2 and 3 weeks, maybe every 5 and 6, then they're a very expensive paperweight. And when there are other options out there, he doesn't really have a bad game, Salah, generally. He does have bad points returns for fantasy. Bruno seems to have bad games, but he always gets the points, whether it's a free kick, whether it's some kind of dodgy assist. He just carries that little bit of luck, and so much play goes through him. Whereas with Liverpool, you've got your Manes, you've got your Firminos, you've got your Yotas, and I just think at United, maybe he's got a little bit of Rashford, maybe he's got a little bit of Martial when he's hit, but you know that the majority of those creative players in that final third, Bruno's going to be involved in it. So I think Bruno is a smarter pick, definitely.
Yeah, I've changed my opinion this week, just from the starting perspective as the bare minimum there. I'm not sure if Man United are going to get some really good results over the next few game weeks because of difficult, and there's the blank in there. And so I wouldn't be against the idea of getting both out and then Fernandes back when the fixtures swing. But the thing with Fernandes, much like Salah was until recently, was you could kind of expect a output. You can with Fernandes at the moment. He's got the penalties. Man United are still attacking fairly well. They're further up the table. They're scoring more goals. And so that's kind of appeased there. I'll skip Leeds because obviously we've covered them. We've covered Manchester United. I do want to talk about Mason Mount though, because of the Chelsea picks, I think this one is a maverick one because obviously we don't know who's starting week in, week out. But I think Mount is one of the more secure players. But then looking at the points for the season of players, under 8 million, he's done well. 114 points over the course of the season. He's got the third best expected points of players under 8 million, only behind Grealish and Neto, which is quite an interesting one that Neto's at the top there. But over the course of the season, he's been a stellar performer for Chelsea. He's put in some good numbers, fairly good XG. He's great in terms of chances created. 5 goals to his name. Expected assists of 7. So he's doing both kind of bits at the moment, scoring goals, but also getting those assists as well. And he looks good. The Chelsea attack is looking good. They're much improved under Tuchel. But there is this problem with them that they're not scoring goals, but they are keeping clean sheets. But Mount is kind of almost the brightest amongst the bunch. And I feel like he's the one that will either score the goal or assist the person that is going to score the goal when he plays, though. And it kind of goes back to this point there, Ben. Do you think it's too risky with Mount? 7 million in my team, but, he might not start each game week. Going into the end run of the season, the business end, I want a starting 11 that I can rely on.
Yeah, that's the concern. Prior to this game week, I had Mount in other formats, and the intentions were to bring him on the official game. He looked as if he was locked in. He looked as if he was one of Tuchel's favourites, one of the first names on the team sheet. Of course, he gets benched and he gets dropped. And maybe that's just Tuchel's. But you look at the players who come in. Havertz come in and he earned the plaudits of the boss. He was saying, they're the types of performances that we come to expect. We want it to build. We know he can perform better. There's a lot of competition. Ziyech, Pulisic. We've seen Abraham out of the matchday squad. Giroud not even getting on. Timo Werner in there. There's a lot of names, and Mount looks the safest option, but in and around that 7 million price point. You've still got Gundogan, and we talked about how his role might have changed, but he has scored for City tonight, so he is on the score sheet. You can look at Jess Lingard, cheap, getting numbers. There's somebody who I looked at when Madison and Barnes was in it was Tielemans. And I know we're not really struck on Leicester at the moment, but he's went from that holding midfield role to the possibility of playing in just behind that front two of Iheanacho and Vardy, or it would be a 3, if he just went with a 4-2-3-1. And I think Tielemans, brings a little bit as well to the party. So I think, yes, I do like Mount, but if you want guaranteed minutes, I think there are other options out there at a slightly lower price point.
And the thing is as well, I've mentioned him there, Neto looks fairly good. There's Lookman. There's others that I'll kind of move on to in a moment or so. So it's hard to kind of justify him. He is in my provisional squad here at the moment. Just to kind of inform you, Ben, it's Mount, De Bruyne, Fernandes in my midfield, along with Lookman and Smith Rowe as kind of almost a place setter at the moment. But I'm not settled on it. You know, there's a lot of misgivings with that team, and I think I'll probably be changing it quite a few times. I mean, that's the good thing about playing a wild card. You've got those unlimited transfers. You can fiddle, you can kind of have a play around with teams and everything, but it is not set in stone at all. Turning attention to other high-performing teams and players, Tottenham, the discussion seems to be now not if you should have assets, but which one, how many. Son, Kane, Bale. How many should you get in your team? They're high on predicted points from now till the end of the season. Bale is in great form. Son is a firm starter. I wouldn't go with Bale just because comments from Mourinho that when he arrives at high levels of fatigue, they're going to take him off, means that they'll probably be hauling him off each week, much like Sergio Aguero historically at that 60-minute mark. And so he's almost got a cap on his points, whereas Son and Kane are going to see each game out as long as they're fit. And so those are the two that I would go with. There's good data on both of those players. Kane is really high up on kind of XG, XGI and expected points over the next few game weeks. So he is a firm one and possibly captaincy choice this game week as well. So do you kind of agree there, Ben, you know, with our discussions about players who are definitely going to play, definitely going to get minutes, that Son and Kane are the two that you'd want to get, and Bale is a bit too much of a liability at the moment?
Yeah, while Tottenham are still involved in the Europa League, and as they progress into the, deeper into that competition, Jose Mourinho will want to be going stronger and stronger with his lineup. At the minute, he can afford to involve some of those fringe players, but to expect somebody like Gareth Bale, who's played very little football, not just since he's arrived at Tottenham, but over the last few years at his time, the latter years of Madrid, to expect him to be playing 3 games a week, starting, back to back, is a big, big ask. And there will have to be some kind of compromise somewhere along the line. We've already seen Gareth Bale complaining about 1 or 2 muscular issues. Nothing too serious, but from the outside looking in, it comes across as being a player who is, he's almost been there, done it. He knows his body, he knows his limitations, and, Jose Mourinho cut a little bit of a frustrated figure back in the last problem when he said, we've assessed him, he's had the scan, there's nothing showing up, but Gareth Bale said he didn't feel comfortable, and therefore he wanted to train away from the group with the sports science team. And at that point, you maybe thought the writing was on the wall a little bit with regards to Gareth Bale in this but we've since seen that he's really looking to recapture some of the form that Tottenham supporters remember from his first time at the club. But there may come a point where Gareth Bale does break down or doesn't quite feel 100%, and he takes himself out of the firing lane again. And for me, it's too risky. It's always going to be Harry Kane. I would be reluctant to double up on Tottenham because I just think, there are no guarantees with that team. But with Harry, he cuts across all of the fixtures. He cuts across form. And you've got the added bonus that he's on spot kicks as well.
Yeah, he's got that ability to score in any game as well. It doesn't matter about the opposition. He's got that Aguero ability to him. The other one of the other teams that have performed well this season, Aston Villa. A lot of people are looking at them, but they basically lost all their attacking punch at the moment. Grealish, his importance to that team can never be overstated. And without him in the side, they've done all right, but they haven't scored that many goals. The Grealish situation seems unclear. because, you can kind of open that one up actually a bit more there, Ben, but because of the type of injury that he has, there is no kind of, he'll be back in 2 weeks, he'll be back in 3 weeks. But the second thing is that the side have not been the same since the COVID outbreak, and basically their season is in two halves because that happened around game week 19. And so they've gone from top 4, top 5 to now top 10 at best, and also 9 goals since game week 19 is a very poor return for that attack there. So, yeah, what is the Grealish situation, Ben? And are Aston Villa an uneasy own for you as well?
So to answer your question, is there anybody in Aston Villa that I'd be leaning towards, or no? The only one player I have got is Martinez, and that simply came back from the Arsenal. I've started with Leno and Martinez, and I've continued with those two keepers throughout the season. Regarding Jack Grealish, the issue is it's about managing the condition first and foremost. We think it's probably been brought on by overuse, overtraining, could well be linked to that COVID shutdown, and different training environment, different training intensities, scheduling, and then coming back in and, trying to get that little bit of sharpness back, and then being thrust back into, the Premier League, this high energy environment where the fixtures are coming thick and fast. The good news on that front is it looks as if Jack Grealish is training pain-free. I would always err on the side of caution with this type of injury because, it is a fine balancing act along the way, and you can go days where you're training, symptom-free almost, and then something can flare up overnight. But what I would say at this point in time, there is a strong possibility that Jack could actually return in game week 28 against Newcastle. But, we treat that information with care because, there's nothing to say that he won't wake up tomorrow morning and he goes out for a light jog and you feel that pain. And like I say, it does respond well to rest. He has been working on an Alter G treadmill. And for those who are not familiar, it's an anti-gravity treadmill. So he's been able to maintain base levels of fitness. And what the treadmill does, it actually, removes some of the stress going through the body in terms of weight bearing. So he's only been running at maybe 50% of his weight, and then that will gradually increase to 60 to 70 till he goes out on the training pitches with the medical team in the sports science department. And that's been going well. So he has progressed. And like I say, if he continues on that same trajectory, then, he could, unfortunately for us, be back against Newcastle.
Well, I hope he doesn't do bits if he is back, because I've got the soft spot for Newcastle. So moving on to another team in Claret, and this is the team that I would plumb for if I was choosing between the two. West Ham, third best attack since game week 19. It's almost like, as Aston Villa have, gone into the distance and shrugged away, West Ham have taken the mantle of a team in Claret and kind of gone up the table and represented them. They have the third best XG, third best goals tally since that game week 19. Lingard and Antonio have both looked so good. So I think they're good to own. And I think the thing with West Ham as well is they've almost hit that higher gear where they're even playing well against the big teams. They had a good game against Manchester City, really good XG there. Looking at it, one of the only teams this season to actually outscore Man City in terms of XG. So looking at them, I think Lingard and Antonio, I've already got Cresswell in my team, and I think that the double up there is looking good. There are some other players around that price point, but then I'd probably lean towards more Lingard over Mount after kind of having these discussions. There's Neto, there is Lookman as well. But I think that Lingard is just in the third best attack at the moment. You want players from teams that are basically playing in the top 4, top 6 attacks, as many as possible. And Lingard is that. Antonio is that.
Nothing to play for. We keep on bleating on about this. Jesse Lingard has come to prove a point. He's motivated, and now he's part of a team that is, looking to break into that top 6, maybe even top 4 if they continue the way they're going. And they want to stay there. David Moyes said it the other day. We fell out of that top 4 place, and that only made us want to get back there even more. So when teams are driven with a purpose, and you don't forget West Ham had a pretty horrendous season last year. It wasn't until Project Restart came along and their top flight status was assured with some outstanding performance from Antonio. I think he's the key. If you can keep him fit, and then you've got the players in and around, the Ben Ramas, the Lanzinis, the Bowens, the Fornals, the Lingards, then the future is bright. And then you stick Souček in there as well with somebody like Cresswell and Kufal, supplying the bullets. Then there's a lot to like about that David Moyes team.
Yeah, I think I'll be investing in 3 assets actually, because they're arguably the 3rd best team, especially attacking wise, in this second half of the season. Neto's a quick one that I want to kind of look at. Wolves' data, not good. His individual data is good. But there's also this talk of the fixture swing from game week 31 onwards. I think game week 28 actually looks quite good because they're playing Liverpool. For those of you that don't follow our fan team stuff, I've kind of plumbed that Neto and Wolves will actually do something against Liverpool at that game week. They do have a difficult game week 30 against West Ham, but then there is a sea of green going on from 31 onwards. But there is this other counterpoint that they play Fulham, Sheffield United, Burnley, West Brom, Brighton, Tottenham and Everton, but quite a few of those sides are battling relegation. Wolves arguably don't have much to play for apart from pride, whereas those teams do. So there is this double-edged sword, and the data proves it as well, is that those teams at the bottom, when they've got something to prove and play for, they do almost overperform at times, or they do put in more of a shift. And so Neto, on paper, does have good stats. He does play against some weak defences, but then you contextualise that these teams have a lot to play for, that they're going to be fighting relegation, and maybe Sheffield United is the only one in there that you can say, well, they could have a defensive stop out. So is that one maybe a misguided one that people in the community are looking at?
I've been on Neto for a few weeks myself, and I dare say, been a little bit disappointed with his returns when watching his level of performance. I mean, there's no doubt there's a lot of potential there. He's got a big future ahead of him. But to me, I think there's a lot of... He seems to have taken on board the mantle of being, the Wolves' main outlet, with Raul Jimenez injured and all, and dare I say what the non-entity that is Adama Traore this season. He has done nothing, literally nothing. No goals, no assists, and their end with William Jose, yet to score. Another big signing, Silva, still a young lad, still cutting his teeth and learning his trade. Neto, he's been there. This is his sort of it was his breakthrough year last season. He's looked to build upon that. I almost feel as if he's just took too much on board, and I think he's put himself under a lot of pressure. He just seems to be trying too hard sometimes, and maybe he was maybe unlucky not to score against Aston Villa when a great run, electric pace. I can't remember. I think it was Matty Target that he was past from a Wolves defended a corner really well. They left him on one, and he was away. And Martinez pulled off a decent save. But I just don't like Wolves, if the truth be told, at the minute. They're not the team that has graced the Premier League for the last 2 seasons. There's been a clear change in philosophy, in formation, in mindset with regards to how they play the game. There's no link up now. You haven't got those bombing on wing backs. It's a lot more passive. It's a lot more conservative. And as opposed to maybe going out there and really pushing and creating and making things happen as they have done through explosive transitions of play. It just seems just a little bit predictable, maybe methodical, and I find them a little bit of a hard watch, if the truth be told. Wolves this season, and I think Neto would absolutely be smashing it and flourish in another team. I just think he's tempered a little bit with how this Wolves team is set up currently.
Yeah, and the data would reflect that as well, Ben. The team have been...
That'll be the first time I've ever said something and the data's backed us up.
Oh, no, I'm sure you've got great intuition, Ben. But this is the thing. Over the last 6 game weeks, Wolves are bottom 5 for shots inside the box. They're bottom half for XG, for chances created. They're a little bit higher, but they're obviously not creating good enough quality. And then you look at whole season... and Wolves are, I think, 16th there for XG total. It's not very good, in terms of XG non-penalty. They've not been doing a lot. Even Fulham sit higher than them. It's worrying stuff there. And so this is the thing with Neto, is he's individually brilliant, and sometimes he can do this, but then it's a lot of weight on his shoulders in a team that isn't doing too well. Whereas I think this is maybe a better suggestion, but looking at Ademola Lookman, the Fulham side is sitting in a Europa League spot in the second half of the season. Fulham have the 7th best XG since game week 19, 5th best shots in the box, and 4th for total chances created. And Lookman is involved in a lot of this. There is the worry that there's only 8 goals over this period, so they're underperforming that pretty good XG. They have been unlucky, but there's also been the decisions that have been unfair against them. Looking at their run towards the end of the season, it is difficult, but they've got a lot to play for. And kind of throwing in there as well, Diagne, another player that has a difficult run of fixtures towards the end of the season in a relegation fighting team. But over the last 6 game weeks, he himself is top for players in terms of XGI, and he's been unlucky not to score with his 4.63 XG. I can see him scoring in some of these games because, frankly, West Brom need goals. Some of these games that are contextualised as difficult, you look at the likes of maybe Southampton, Leicester a little bit, Aston Villa, Wolves, Arsenal, Liverpool. These are kind of given as difficult ones, but then they've had leaky defences this season. They've let in goals, and to these types of situations that Diagne can do well in. So looking at Lookman, looking at Diagne, do you like any of those?
Diagne, I've had him since possibly week 2 of his arrival in the Premier League. I think he's been very, very unfortunate. I think his only goals come at Old Trafford, and that was that a draw? Did they pick up a point at Old Trafford? I think, if I recall correctly. But in between, we've had disallowed goals. We've had hit the woodwork a couple of times. I mean, he had an injury time equaliser, which I think was half an armpit hair offside last weekend, and look, he's going to be the focal point of Sam Allardyce's team. He's still getting up to speed. He's still getting used to the league. But I think he could turn out to be a cracking player. And I think he's putting himself out there. He's putting himself in the shop window for, even if West Brom do go down, I think there's opportunities for him to keep on performing in that Premier League at other clubs. It's certainly a player that I would like to see in Newcastle, for example. A good, big target man, strong, athletic, and like I say, just a little bit unfortunate. Comfortable on the ball. I do like him a lot.
2 more to end on, and it's DCL Richarlison. Good fixture swing, but poor data from Everton. But then Richarlison personally is on a good run and good data, so he's looking all right. And actually, I'd plumb for him over DCL at the moment just because he is the player in form. The second one that I'm putting to you, Ben, to kind of end the show, is Aubameyang. And the interesting thing is he's kind of like Richarlison. in a team with poor data, attacking data, but personally on a good run. And the thing is, talking about fixtures, maybe not form, but Arsenal and Everton sit second and third towards the end of the season for the difficult rating. They've got some fantastic fixtures to end the season on. Has Aubameyang come to form at the right time for you? And is Richarlison looking good as well for that end of season finisher? Or is that maybe something a bit too far because they're both in teams that aren't doing too well?
I'm not really too bothered about the teams themselves. I do like Richarlison. And of course, being differential dinnery, I would always plumb for the Brazilian over DCL. I think DCL is still at around 39-40% ownership, whereas Richarlison is sub 10%. I keep on bleating on of the fact that Ancelotti has slightly tweaked Richarlison's positional game. He doesn't have that defensive responsibility anymore, and that's been reflected in his outputs in terms of goals. Ancelotti firmly believes that the Brazilian should be, comfortably in double figures and beyond that season. So he's repaying the faith in the manager. And Richarlison, I would take him over DCL in a heartbeat without any issues there whatsoever. Follow the form. What I would say about that. Aubameyang is a harder sell for me. Obviously, the outlay is a lot greater, and I've been burnt already with Aubameyang this season when I stuck with him for far too long at the beginning of the campaign. And it also comes down to, where Aubameyang starts. We've seen him as in that central striker role in recent games, which is great. With Odegaard in behind, Willian or Pepe, and then Saka. But you've got Lacazette, who Mikel Arteta likes to throw in there. And if you put Lacazette in, you're putting Aubameyang out on the left-hand side. Just doesn't get involved enough for me. Not for the price. And he cuts a frustrating figure when things aren't going his way. To me, he's never a 7.5 performer. He's a 9 and he's getting you goals, or he's a nothing, really. He just, a nothing player. You might get, the odd penalty return from him when things aren't going really well, but it is a harder sell just given the fact that, we are talking premium for Aubameyang.
Is it with him, though, that maybe there's this little shift in the team that they're playing slightly differently, because he's got 6 goals in his last 6, and he's actually got the best minutes per XGI of any player in the league over the last 6. Does that entice you a little bit, that data, or is it just the fact that I look at the Arsenal team data, very poor. I look at the fact that, yes, Aubameyang has been in and out of form, and for his premium price, I can't justify it myself either.
We're talking about a team who are sitting 10th in the Premier League as well at this moment in time, and any other manager, an English manager in there, I think there would be big questions asked. Should he really be in the job? Have Arsenal progressed from Unai Emery? There'll be arguments either way. Maybe he's internally behind the scenes. Yes, he's really starting to get rid of some of that dead wood and making some really tough decisions. But ultimately, all supporters are bothered about is those performances on the pitch. Now, not so long ago, you would look at 4th place in the Premier League as a disappointment, and then, the Wenger years. Now, winning the Europa League may be their only chance of actually qualifying for Europe next season. And again, does that come into play? And will Mikel Arteta then start to cut his cloth accordingly around that? So, and we've seen, he's not afraid to drop Aubameyang and keep him and rest him for those games. So, too much of a risk, when you consider everything else as well, then no, not for me. But Kevin De Bruyne scored again. It is 5-2 Manchester City.
Oh my gosh.
So,
they've conceded 2 though. That's interesting. And that does kind of bring back to our point that we had a little bit earlier about whether Man City can kind of keep up the good performances in terms of their defensive abilities. But for now, I hope that you've enjoyed the insight into my wildcard team, and I hope that actually this wildcard team does bits for me. I'd just like to remind you to make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because we've got great daily content coming out at the moment. And tomorrow morning, we'll be answering your questions, 5 of them selected from the community to help you with your team choices coming up into this early deadline, because you have to make sure that this deadline is on Friday. So make sure to stay tuned to Premier Injuries over the coming weeks and months, because we've got a lot of good content coming out. But to sign us out, Ben, what have you got to say?
Thanks again, Jason. I really enjoyed another wildcard edition. Good luck for the upcoming game weeks and the run-in to the end of the season. You've offered some good rationale and some decent insights, certainly worthy of some serious consideration from my good self. Thanks for watching, guys. Please feel free to add any comments in the box. We will respond. We do read them, and they do help shape and guide our content. But for now, we will see you after the game week 28 deadline for more defensive and attacking assets. But as Jason mentioned, we do have 5 questions that we will respond to from the community before then. So keep your eyes and ears peeled, and we'll see you again very soon.